Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks for joining the 14 Islamic course 2022. There will be 10 sessions in total, and it will be held from 7 to 8:30 every Saturday. If you attend 7 out of the 10 sessions, you will be awarded a certificate. Today is the 8th session, and it's on the Palestine issue, and it will be presented by Brother Siddiq. Brother Siddiq is the founder of Ordinary Muslim Productions and author of the book Q&A with an Islamophobe. He is a well-known writer on many topics associated with Islam and has been in the media limelight for about 20 years. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to you now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. Ms. Wong, you're driving, so be careful while driving. It's a huge topic, really. It's a huge topic. It unites the Muslim community in many ways. It divides the Muslim community in many ways. But I think I wanted to start by perhaps talking about something that I think is very profound. This is a quote by an Israeli, and it sums up why they are very, very successful in shaping the narrative. Fear of loss often proves more powerful than hope to gain. The Israelis have been very successful in gaining the narrative about Israel, primarily because they have repeatedly emphasized and re-emphasized and reiterated on countless times that we are under threat, as in they are under threat. And because of that programming within the local population, they tend to feel that, there is a tremendous loss. If they lose Israel, they lose everything. And given such, they work really hard to preserve whatever they've got. And which is why, granted, they have worked really, really hard, and given the devastating losses they suffered 70 odd years ago following the Holocaust, they have managed to, come as far as they have. So I think that's the first thing I would say about the Palestine issue. Now, when it comes to the Palestine issue, there are really three different ways of looking at it. One is the Palestinian historical version, right, that we Muslims are generally surrounded with. Then there's the Israeli historical version, which, again, if you talk to ordinary Israelis themselves, their version of what actually happened is completely different. Now, I don't know how many of you are following the news lately, but you may have heard about this new movie, Farah, that came out just over a week ago. It's being streamed on Netflix. And obviously the Israelis are incensed that such a movie would come out, talking about what happened 70 years ago, according to a Jordanian Palestinian refugee. So again, their historical version is very, very different. And the third version that appears around the world is basically a mix of myth, facts, and fiction. And this is the most widely circulated version. Some of it is true, some of it is exaggerated, some of it is absolutely false. But in the end, it's all about this. If you were to sum up this entire issue, Israeli-Palestinian issue, it really is about people arguing whose family tree goes back further. The Israelis say, oh, no, we obviously, Ibrahim alayhi salam was a Jew, Nuh alayhi salam was a Jew, and Yusuf alayhi salam was a Jew, Musa alayhi salam was a Jew. That's why, our family tree goes back further. And the Palestinians are like, yeah, true, but then you left for 2,000 years to look for better opportunities in Europe. And you left nothing back in Palestine, and then you come back and then you're basically claiming ownership. So again, that really is the issue. Let's start with history. I mean, that's a good starting point. So that'll actually help you understand the purpose of this talk today. I'm hoping by the end of this talk, you will have a clear picture from a neutral point of view, using the vast majority of my sources are Jewish sources, Jewish sources, Jewish and Israeli sources. And the reason I do that is because these are credible Jewish sources. So nothing here in this presentation can be disputed, because it's not some Muslims anti-Israeli or anti-Semites or someone who has an axe to grind against Israel or Jew can claim that, the material is from, those sources. Here I'm using everything that's from credible Jewish and Israeli sources. So I'll start with, for centuries, Jews had to put up with European anti-Semitism. Now, we all know what happened during the Holocaust, but prior to the Holocaust, what happened was, for centuries, for 50, 70, 100, maybe 200 years, Jews were doing extremely well, hardworking minority population in Europe. But because they were so hardworking, they were doing so well economically, buying up assets, running businesses, running banks, arranging financing, they were not appreciated. Their presence was not appreciated because they were different. So there was a lot of anti-Semitism, similar to what you see in the form of current day Islamophobia today, where you have a lot of second generation, third generation Turkish immigrants, Moroccan immigrants, Syrian immigrants, PhD and master's degree holders doing especially well in the West, and they are experiencing Islamophobia. And because of that anti-Semitism, the Zionist, which is a subsection of the Jews, felt that there was a need to use their money and power and influence to drum up the support for a Jewish state and encourage the migration of Jewish immigrants into Palestine. Now, bear in mind, this is a very important fact. For 400 years, the Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire for 400 years. Now, bear in mind, Israel has only been in charge of current day so-called Palestine or Israel for 72 years. So that's nothing compared to how long Ottoman Empire was in charge of, current day Palestine. But unfortunately, following the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1920, Palestine came under control of the British, and the British was unfortunately strongly influenced by the Zionists, who, in my earlier point I mentioned, were drumming up support for the return of Jews into Palestine. So they were encouraging the migration into Palestine by the Jews. And as part of that, one of many steps, in 1917, Britain issued the famous Balfour Declaration, which basically Balfour is basically named after the foreign minister at the time of Britain. His name was Lord Balfour. And he was the one who issued the declaration promising a homeland for the Jews in Palestine. That was in 1917, 30 years later, after a lot of incursion by the Jews. The UN, United Nations. Now, this is a very interesting part, okay? The UN proposed a splitting up the current day Palestine, 55% for the Israelis and 45% for Arabs. This was completely unfair, but never mind that, okay? Never mind that. I say 55% for the Jews, 45% for the Arabs. It's problematic, unfair, but you know what? All right, let's move on. 1948, Israel was given green light by the UN to form as a country, all right, because now they had obviously 55% of land space. Obviously, it wasn't enough for them. So they expelled 700,000 Palestinians, the Nakba, the expulsion, at least 700,000 Palestinians from Palestine, creating 700,000 Palestinians who had children after children and children and grandchildren. And today that's turned into 7 million refugees after 74 years, 75 years. In 1948, the same year, war broke out between Palestinian Arabs and Zionists. All right. And of course, the Zionists were given training by the British, and they had weapons, primarily because obviously they sided with Britain during World War II. 1949, a year after Israel was formed, right, they continued the ethnic cleansing. So from 55%, they went to 78%. Okay, and this was completely illegal up until now. Remember, when the UN says occupied land, they're actually referring to the 45% that originally belonged to Arabs, the Palestinians. They're not disputing the 55%. But nonetheless, in 1949, they had 78% of the land. Right? And this went on for, and this encroachment went on for a good 20 years, 18 years. In 1967, the Arabs had it. So then you had, I think, Jordan, Egypt, 6 countries that attacked Israel. But because they all had their own strategy and own independent military objectives, they were not united in their attack, and they lost the war. And Israel, going back to my original first slide, when the fear of losing is far more than the fear of loss proves more powerful than hope to gain, they knew they had nothing to lose, and which is why they worked really hard in repelling these forces. And not only that, they won the war and they took over West Bank and Gaza, 22% of the land. So now they basically occupied 78%. So again, in summary, UN gave Israel 55% of the land in 1947. All right. Israel ended up illegally expanding its territory to 78% by 1949 and took control of another 21% by 1967. So in all, basically, they were only given 55%, but they ended up owning 98% of current-day Palestine, 98, 99%, all illegal according to international law. Up until today, it is legal. What they are rightly given according to international law is only 55%. So that's, you know, if I were to draw a parallel example, I would say, imagine you own a home and somebody coming into your house and say, you know what, now 55% of that belongs to me. That's fair, unfair, fine, you give up. And over 20 or 30 year, over a 20 to 30 year period, what they do is they keep encroaching that territory. And before you know, in about 1948 to 1967, so in about 18 years time, that 55% becomes 98%. Your own home that you own, all right, according to international law, right, becomes theirs. So that's exactly what has happened. There's no other way to spin it. This is an infographic somebody created. I'm sure you've seen it before. We start from the left, 1970, you know, that was Palestine, and then 1946, slight encroachment, 1947, a fair bit of encroachment, 1948, when Israel was formally formed as a country, 67, further encroachment, and present day, it's a disaster. So that kind of sums it up quite nicely. Now, while I understand obviously West Bank and Gaza, I like to think I'm more of a specialist when it comes to Gaza. I know a bit more about Gaza because of the living conditions there are atrocious. The little city has a population of 2 million inside a 60-kilometer wall, and it's often referred to as the world's largest open-air prison. It has an unemployment rate of 49%. To keep it in context, again, Hong Kong has an unemployment rate of maybe 3%. Okay, and again, that's not because they don't have enough qualified people. Gaza has a lot of engineers, doctors, and teachers, a lot of professionals, but they can't get jobs. And because they're actually born in Gaza, they are not allowed out of Gaza. Going into West Bank, which is, again, let's go back to the previous slide. How do I explain this? You can see that if you go to any of the infographic, let's go with 1967, the second one from the right. You can see Gaza in the far left-hand side. And Ramallah and Jerusalem and Bethlehem, that's West Bank. So you can see that there's a huge, there's absolutely no way to go from Gaza into West Bank unless you go through Israel. And, unless you fancy going through the 2,000 checkpoints that they have littered across. So it makes it very, very difficult. 80% of the population rely on humanitarian aid. Less than 4% of fresh water is drinkable. 4%. Can you imagine that? 4% of water is drinkable. Which is another way of saying that 96% of the water is not safe for consumption. So imagine the waterborne diseases and the impact on children and adults and those who are sick. Cancer is the second most common cause of death. Medicines are extremely expensive. Electricity is a problem because obviously they Israel bombed a power plant in violation of Protocol 1 of the 1949 Geneva Convention. Again, this can all be verified. This is not fictitious. This is all can be independently verified. Point number 7 is they only have 4 hours electricity every day, if they're lucky. I know quite a few Palestinians who've grown up and who have completed master's degree, let alone PhDs, using candles to study. I mean, you talk about the commitment to study. And again, the funny thing is, no, I shouldn't say funny. The ironic thing is, Palestinians are going through the same thing that the Israelis went through. Because they've got nothing to lose, they're giving it 100%. Except obviously the conditions are really, really challenging for them. Limited opportunities to leave Gaza. When they actually leave Gaza, the Palestinians themselves, because the PLO is actually in charge, is recognized as the representative of Palestinians. So wherever in the world you go to Malaysia, Indonesia, you go to UK, you go to Europe, if you want to look for the embassy or the consulate of Palestine, you have to go to the PLO's office. There is no office for that represents Palestinians from Gaza. And because Hamas is seen as a rival to PLO, Palestinians from Gaza are discriminated against by their own government. And that's dictated by the Israelis. And again, this fact is verified, double verified, because I have a number of Palestinians in contact who have confirmed the same. Now, going back into Gaza, the fishing zone is officially 10 nautical miles, or 18 kilometers wide. 18 kilometers wide. So basically, a fisherman can go 18 kilometers into the Gazan Sea. But the thing is, you can only find fish, edible fish, 14 kilometers at sea. So would a fisherman go all the way out there and risk being fired by Israeli gunships, as has been known to happen on many, many occasions? Egypt, strange, a very, very strange country. They obviously are in cahoots with Israel and retains a bizarre stranglehold. So basically, Gaza is surrounded by Israel on one side and Egypt on the other side. So the only way for Gazans to actually leave Gaza is either through the Rafah border, which obviously goes into Egypt, or Erez border, which goes into Israel. Now, whatever I've shared so far, if it's not true, all right, I would urge you to go to Oxfam's website, type Oxfam Gaza, 2 words on Google, see what comes up. Do the same with Amnesty International. Do the same with Human Rights Watch, UNICEF, countless other charities. Look it up. They have all universally condemned the inhumane land, sea, and air blockade in the strongest possible terms. And yet nothing changes. Now let's look at Israel. On the flip side, 5 million Palestinians live in West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Arab Israelis, and they're all suffering under Israeli apartheid. the illegal occupation, right? There's no other way to spin it. Seriously, there is no other way to spin it because this is the truth. The state of Israel actually holds a world record. Maybe North Korea is the other title holder for continually ignoring or violating the largest number of UN resolutions, Security Council resolutions, and Geneva Conventions. Again, this is something that can be verified. Now, point number 3, I find it very, very interesting as well. I looked it up. There are 9 countries that have nuclear weapons. 4 countries and Israel, they have refused to become signatories to the NPNT, which is the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Treaty, which basically means that there are 4 countries that have said that, you know what, we have nuclear weapons, but we are not going to show you what goes on with our nuclear weapons program. But yeah, we claim that obviously they are for peaceful means only. And among the 4 countries that have signed this NPNT, Israel and North Korea are the only 2 countries that have opted for nuclear ambiguity, which basically means that they're not sharing anything, zero information, no international nuclear inspector can visit these countries and get an update on their stockpile and what they're actually doing with these weapons. These are the only 2 countries in the world, okay? Israel and North Korea. Fact number 4, Israel came into being in 1948 after describing, again, 530 villages, expelling 700,000 Palestinians, all right? And fact number 5, which I've already gone over, it began with the ethnic cleansing of 80% of Palestine, followed by 22%. So now they own approximately 92 to 98. Actually, it was supposed to be 98%, but the reason why in this particular slide it shows it adds up to 92 is because obviously in 2003 they gave up Gaza. So that's why the number has gone down a little bit. But yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you have to be very careful. They pulled out of Gaza, but they haven't left Gaza. So are they occupying Gaza? No, but the blockade is still on. They're suffocating the city in many, many ways. Number 6, fairly straightforward. Number 7, this is a very depressing fact. United States has vetoed 53 Security Council resolutions critical of Israel. United States being a member of the Security Council, so whenever somebody tables a paper condemning Israel, the US, the UK, several other countries, Russia is one of them, because they've got a powerful seat on the Security Council, they can veto it, which means it never goes to debate, which means you can't condemn it, you protect them. Ironically, Russia is doing the same thing right now, so which is why this Ukraine war has gone on for since March, since March. And many a times, powerful countries have tried bringing Security Council resolution condemning Russia. But because Russia's got a seat on the Security Council resolution, they keep vetoing it, and which is why it goes nowhere. So, and the US is like, what? You can't do that. And people are like, you've been doing that for over 50 years. Point number 8, again, this sums it up. I mean, if there's one thing in my entire presentation that I have to say, I'll say this, that no Israeli government has tried the one thing that everyone knows will work for long-term peace: give back the land. You want 55%? It's not fair. It is not fair that you keep 55%. And I am not a Palestinian. I don't have the right to negotiate on behalf of Palestinians. But I'm saying, as a starter, give up that 45% that you've taken over illegally, all right? Try that, see what happens. Well, of course they won't. Number 9, 130,000 structures since 1948 have been demolished. So again, we have 3 segments. Remember, we have Gaza, we have West Bank, and then the 3rd segment, very important, are the Israeli citizens, Arabs, Palestinians who live in present-day Israel. They are minorities in Israel. They have Israeli passports, all right? And unfortunately, despite living there, imagine living in Hong Kong and having 65 or, a number of laws that are blatantly racist against minorities in Hong Kong. I mean, fortunately, I understand racism and discrimination, and I lived in Hong Kong for a number of years, so I understand that. But at least we have the Equal Opportunities Commission, and you have a number of mechanisms in Hong Kong to make sure that everyone is protected by the law. But in Israel, apparently there are 65 blatantly racist Israeli laws against non-Jews. Yeah, so the same point. They have segregation policies, laws and regulation. Palestinians have to put up with regulations encouraging apartheid and military occupation, whereas Israelis living in Israel can move wherever they want to. There are no checkpoints they have to go through. Healthcare is different, roads are different, infrastructure is different, healthcare, education, you name it. It's like living in a parallel universe. And again, point number 12, depressing fact, is approximately 700 Palestinian children are illegally detained in Israel each year, according to human rights groups and NGOs. The thing is, this is a PowerPoint presentation, and wherever you see sections highlighted in green, those are actually hyperlinks. So if you'd like to verify this, I'm happy to share this presentation at the end of this presentation, and you can just click on the link. It'll take you to the source to back up what I'm saying. And these are independent sources that you can verify. There are 700 checkpoints and road gates that Palestinians have to go through that none of the Israeli settlers or Israelis have to put up with. 700 checkpoints, right? And this is for Palestinian Israelis, Palestinians who hold Israeli passports, okay? Israel has used chemical weapons on civilians. And then 15 point, Gaza is under crippling blockade. You know this, everyone knows this. So these, again, I having researched these points, I thought, okay, I came up with a series of questions, 9 questions, and I thought, you know what? I'd like to ask these questions to mainstream media. Why they should try and answer these questions. In the last 73 years, why is there why is there so much emphasis on Molotov cocktails and rocks and balloons and rockets from Gaza, but nobody talks about fighter jets, tanks, armored vehicles, helicopters, battleships, automatic weapons, rifles, artillery bombs, Iron Dome? Nobody talks about that, right? But people want to talk about balloons, people want to talk about rockets, they want to talk about Molotov cocktails and rocks. It's completely disproportional. This is the media. Why is that? Right now, granted, and it can be terrifying. Imagine you living in Israel and rockets. You never know where rockets are going to land because obviously they don't have advanced technology, and they're terrifying. Granted, they're terrifying. But what about cluster bombs that contain multiple explosive munitions or smart precision guided weapons, and they contain 1,000 kilograms of more of explosives, extremely dangerous. Right, a single shot is far more dangerous, as we have seen how Gaza has repeatedly been leveled on repeated occasions. Right, so where's the media coverage there? Now, again, point number 3: in the last 15 years alone, between 2006 and 2021. There have been 5 conflicts between Israel and Gaza. There have been more than 5, but 5 big ones. Now, this is again verified, right? And again, if you go to a certain website that I'll share towards the end of the presentation, you will be able to verify if this number is true. 3,165 Palestinians have been killed, civilians only, okay? I'm not talking about fighters, I'm not talking about soldiers. And 31 Israeli civilians, right? That's a ratio of 102. I mean, if this isn't a genocide, then what is? Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question. The children, they are detained by the Israelis. What happens to the children?
What happens to the children? They're actually in jail, waiting for trial. And
why do they detain children?
Why do they?
Why do they detain the children?
Because they throw rocks, or they speak foul, or they take part in protest. And it's a mechanism that the Israeli government uses to break the spirit and the soul of children. Because what better way to break a society than jailing them, breaking their, not the physical backbone, but the mental, psychological backbone, so that obviously they're not exposed to education. They can grow up and fairly uneducated, lack of educational opportunities. And it sends out a very strong warning to the rest of the population that this is what's going to happen. And look, we're not joking about it. We have done this before.
Yes,
So it's a tool of war. It's a tool of war. Very effective, extremely effective. Well, I wouldn't say it's very effective, because obviously, it's not like that has slowed down the Palestinians, because they have gone.
Is it something that like same as the one in China, the Uyghur children, they are detained also and put in a camp and all that? Is it the same way also they're doing this?
To be honest, I don't know. I don't know if the same thing happens in China. I wouldn't be sure. But to be fair, I don't think the comparison is correct. What Palestinians have gone through over the last 70 years, I mean, granted, I'm sure there are hardships in China, and not just in China, in many parts of the world, many parts of the world, in Kashmir, in Syria, and Lebanon, and Libya, and Yemen. I'm sure a lot of people are going through a lot in Myanmar. But 70 years this has gone on. And I'm not trying to minimize the hardships anywhere else in the world, but I'd like to think I'm more of a Palestinian specialist, and therefore I'm not qualified to speak on behalf of other places which endure such hardships. But what I can say is this is an illegal tool of war, which is used against children. And if they think they can break them, so far it hasn't, because children will keep fighting. They will never give up, because it's their future. Point number 4, exactly answering my earlier point, that there is a law, international humanitarian law, which states that any war, any battle, any war that aims to fight for national liberation, right, is an essential right of occupied people. So if you're occupied, right, you have the right, according to international law, to fight against the occupier, right? And this is part of the Geneva Convention, ratified on the 12th of August in 1949, 1 year, ironically, after Israel was formed. So this is actually quite interesting, timely. Point number 5. People say whenever rockets fall into Israel, they say, you know what, it's a dangerous escalation. It encourages a cycle of violence. But what happens when peaceful worshippers are attacked at Al-Aqsa, or unarmed protesters are attacked? What about the ongoing illegal occupation? The blockade of Gaza? Aren't these a dangerous escalation and encouraging a cycle of violence? But again, these are things that the media doesn't talk about. And we need to understand these are talking points that we need to raise from time to time. Right? And the thing is, they will have no answer for it, because it's clear cut. It's so clear cut. This is not about taking sides. Ask them point blank, what about this? And again, this is not about whataboutism either. This is about facts. Yeah, and the last point, which I'm sure everyone is exposed to, is why is the Palestinian disposition framed as conflict? When it's not about two equal forces. One has more power than the other. So basically it's about the occupier versus the occupied. Coming towards the end, again, this irritates me to the bone. Why is this Palestinian dispossession framed as complex? Hold on for a second. Musa, give me water, please. Why is this dispossession framed as complex? But come on, let's be honest. It is not complex. Okay, what is so complex? You own 55%, which you actually don't own, but you own 55%. You've taken the other 48%, right? Just return the land. That's not yours. Number 8, again, very timely point here, talking about what's happening in Ukraine and Russia. You know, we implicate certain countries for unlawful killings, calling them massacres. But then again, we start walking on eggshells when it talks about Israel and Palestine. So given what I've shared with you, and these are all facts, again, verifiable, easily verifiable. And again, if you would like to, I'm happy to share this presentation. You can click on the respective links and you can verify them from all independent sources, a lot of them charities and human rights groups. I've gone to great pains to actually collect them. So given such, we know that Israel is an apartheid state. So would it have been acceptable to do business with apartheid South Africa, Nazi Germany, and present-day North Korea? If it's not, then why are we still doing business with Israel? On what basis? You know, how is Israel clean? Given what they have a clear track record of having done. So now, in this section, we will tackle the often reported issues that are reported in the press. They often say, oh, it's too complex. And again, like I mentioned earlier, no, it isn't. You know, what's so complicated about stealing someone else's land and taking more land and building illegal settlements all along, all right? What's so complicated? There's nothing complex about that, right? Unless you're saying, no, this is not true. They didn't steal someone else's land. Really? All right, let's go back to 1948. This one too. The issue is very hard to resolve, you know. I mean, it's too difficult, it's too challenging, it's too complicated. No, it's not. It's not complicated, it's not hard. Okay, the only reason it seems hard is because one party has stolen a lot of what is not theirs, populated the land with its own people, and now moving out has become really, really difficult and uncomfortable. So let's say Hong Kong and Kowloon, all right? So Hong Kong was, say Hong Kong is Israel, 55%, Kowloon is 45% Palestine. And then Israel is given Kowloon as well. And then it starts populating Kowloon for 40, 50 years, started building buildings, populated the entire Kowloon Peninsula. So 40 years later, you're going back and saying, oh, you know what, it's hard. Of course it's hard, because you populated the entire population with Israelis. And moving out is going to be hard. Where are you going to move the people of Kowloon to, right? So that's why they say it's hard to solve. And then, of course, there are minor issues like what to do with Jerusalem, which is obviously revered by the Jews, the Christians, and the Muslims. And again, bear in mind, the Muslims and the Christians are united on this front. It's the Jews who think that, no, Jerusalem belongs to us alone. And the other issue is they want to talk about the fact that, oh, no, you know what are we going to do with our population that has populated Israel now, current day Israel? But they don't want to talk about the 700,000 Palestinians that they kicked out in 1948. And their children and grandchildren are born right now, and they've turned into 7 million refugees littered around Israel. They're living in Jordan and elsewhere, in Palestine, in Syria, in Lebanon, Jordan, in Egypt, right? And they're not allowed to come back. So never mind that. All right, so myth number 3. Why does it all seem complicated then? It seems complicated because the media likes to reinforce that this has been a 1,000-year war, when this is anything but. This thing started no more than 100 years ago in 1912. So yeah, 110 years ago to be exact. exact, 110 years, not a 1,000-year war. Prior to that, the Jews would love living on Muslim land because it was the Christians who used to persecute them, not the Muslims. All right. So let's be very, very clear. This conflict has gone on for about 73 to 110 years at the most. The reason number two is obviously everyone has a different narrative. All right. There's a lot of misinformation. And the issue number three is there are some really powerful groups, influential groups, loud influential groups who like to reinforce that the conflict is too complex. And this is not just Israeli, even the Palestinians like to reinforce that the issue is very, very complex. The Palestinians themselves like to say this. And when I say Palestinians, I mean groups like the PLO in West Bank. They like to say this because obviously they can't get anything done. They're under the control of the Israelis. Oh, this one I mentioned earlier, fighting for centuries. They have not been fighting for centuries, all right? It did not start until 1948, or you might say 1912. Is it long? Yes, but it's far less than the 2,000, 3,000 years that is often projected in the media. It's completely false, right? The only ones that have been fighting with the Jews are the Christians, right? And again, this is historically documented. The Jews always found safe refuge among Muslims. The Christians, on the other hand, always had a problem with them. And again, if you look at the Old Testament, New Testament, it's fascinating why the Christians always had a problem with the Jews, because the Jews always stuck to the Old Testament and rejected the New Testament and the so-called new teachings of Jesus. So again, I don't want to go on a different tangent, but that's for another talk. Again, fascinating why the Christians have historically been against the Jews. Myth number 5. Oh, this is all about religion. Yeah, again, this is false. Religion is a sub-factor, is a small issue in it all. But we Muslims need to remember, this is not about religion alone. This is about stolen land, stolen homes, stolen farms, no right of movement, no right to travel, limited work opportunities that affect Palestinian Muslims as well as Christian Palestinians too. So this is not about religion. This is a human rights issue, right? So they will always try to minimize the issue by saying, no, it's all about religion. You know, the Jews or the Muslims hate the Jews. That's complete false. Again, Israelis and Palestinians hate each other. Like they like to say that as well, the media. But you know what? To be fair, there is a lot of animosity. There is a lot of hatred on both the sides. You know, to be honest, there is. All right. But to say it is the hatred, this is a result of the hatred, that's false. The hatred is the consequences of, as a consequence of the actions of the Israelis. So the hate came later. And the Palestinian reaction came later, following what the Israelis have done over the years. So again, if you ask ordinary Palestinians, what do they want? I mean, they just want full freedom to move, work, live, travel, you know, full right of return for all 7 million refugees. These are this is bare minimum, you know, bare minimum. That's all they're asking for. Okay. But it's a starting point. Oversimplification, but starting point that every Palestinian would want. Okay. Should we go for one state, two state? We hear about a lot of talk about one state, two states. Again, it's not for us to decide. This is for Palestinians to decide. You know, but if you look at from the point of view of the Jews, if it becomes one state means, you know, one single country. But then Jews will become a minority because you have 7 million Palestinians who will all of a sudden become, you know, the majority. Then Jews will become a minority and they would hate that. So one state is out of the question. They would never consider that, right? You know, because obviously they can't imagine that. But this is inevitable. This is what's going to happen eventually. Two states, yes, it's possible, and they keep talking about it, but then again, it's not fair because you're still talking about Israel taking all the lucrative parts of Israel, having control of water and fertile land, strategic areas. So that's not fair. So this is not going to last anyway. So that's the difference between one state and two state. This one they like to say, oh, the Palestinians can't be trusted because they will always attack if given the chance. Really? And look who's been attacking all these years, right? And while there have been attempts to fight the occupation, yeah, okay, so you say this one, right? So Palestinians can't be trusted because they will attack. Really? Okay, so let's look at the Palestinian faction itself, split into two. One is the West Bank, which is obviously the PLO, which for years, for the last 70 years, they've been dead, not 70 years, but for the good part of the last 20, 30 years, they have done nothing but abided by the so-called peace roadmap, negotiating with Israel, going for trips to Oslo and, excuse me, Madrid, White House, all these places. And to what end? Nothing ever happens, And on the other hand, we have another group, Hamas, which has been actually fighting. So to say that, the Palestinians have only fought, and which is why they're not getting anything, is completely false, because Hamas is only a recent development. Again, came about 20 years ago. Prior to that, it was a PLO, which has spent a good 50 years negotiating with Israel peacefully. To what end? Nothing. So again, this is false. There can be no peace until all Palestinians adopt non-violence. Really? Look at British India, right? It was violent independence that actually, as well as Gandhi's non-violence, that led to the expulsion of the British. And the same can be argued across Africa, across most countries that expelled colonial powers. You name it, you name the country. It was a combination of violence, violent calls for independence, as well as non-violence, a combination of both that led to the expulsion. So one doesn't cancel the other, right? So and you saw it was violent independence movement that actually led to the end of apartheid in South Africa, as well as what happened in Nazi Germany, the downfall of Nazi Germany. So again, going back to my earlier point, if Gazan leaders had not chosen violence, Israel would not have left Gaza. Again, a very good point, right? So it was because of violence, Israel thought, you know what, this is not worth it, we're just going to leave. If they had asked them respectfully to leave, they would never have left Israel, right? Meanwhile, West Bank has been committed to the peace roadmap and all that circus for a good 20, 30, 40 years. And what have they got in return? The Palestinians have got expanding settlements and occupation, nothing else. And this is exactly why resisting occupation is a human right. All right? So, all that talk about, that's the historical background, this is the current situation. But what can we do to change the narrative? What can we do to change what's actually happening? And do not think for a second that, it won't change. Because remember, like I said, going back to my earlier slide, the Ottoman Empire was in charge of Palestinian lands for 400 years. Okay, and prior to that, it was another force, and prior to that was another force. Israel's only been in charge for 74 years, right? Now, you look at practically any colonial power, any colonial history. I think the British were in India for about 200 years or 300 years. They were in Africa, depending on which part of Africa, for anywhere from between 50 years to, again, 150 years. The French, the Germans, the Spanish, you name it, the Belgians, they were in charge. The colonial powers were in charge for a good number of 50, 100, 150 years. And in the end, they had to be expelled. So do not think for a second that this is going to be any different. Because there's, in history, from the beginning, from the time of Adam alayhi salam till today. This has never happened. Every colonial power has gotten expelled. And if you look at simple demographics, that'll do it. 70 years on, today, the Palestinian population accounts for 25% of the demographics in Israel. So in the next 20 years, when the Palestinians go to vote, 20 years, I'm talking about in 20 years alone, in what, year 2022, so 2042, when the Palestinians go to vote, they'll be the majority. So this is inevitable unless the Israelis do something dramatic saying that, oh, you know what, Palestinians, Israelis are not allowed to vote. Then why have elections, right? Unless they change the constitution. Because if the day they say, hey, we have elections, we are the only democracy in the Middle East, there you go. It's going to lead to the end of Israel. This is inevitable. And they call it the demographic time bomb, by the way, so which is quite interesting. Anyway, moving on, the solution. There are 4 things we can do, obviously, every one of us, and it's extremely powerful, extremely effective, and it all adds up. One is charity, activism. You have to read up, and of course, you have to boycott. I'm not a big fan of marching, protesting, condemning, selling cupcakes, and sending WhatsApp messages. And I don't have a Facebook account. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not much of a social media person, and because I don't think that's as effective. Charity, yes, it's effective. Activism, it's effective. Reading up about it, informing yourself is extremely effective. And of course, boycotting, using your wallet to vote is extremely effective. Because unless the moral, security, and financial cost of retaining and expanding the illegal occupation is made extremely high for Israel, nothing is going to change. All right. You have to make it extremely, extremely. If you want someone to leave the room, right, you turn off the aircon, or like, how I wake up my boys in the morning. I go into the room, I turn off the aircon, I turn on the lights, and I make it really, really difficult for them. And say, you know what, time for school. Come on, let's go. So what you do is, unless you make the moral, security, and financial cost really high for Israel to expand the occupation, nothing is going to change. So we focus on, I think we focus on read first. Yeah. I love this. Again, you can go online to this website and check it out. There are 20 books. And let me see, I'm just quickly reviewing this. Huh. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Among the 20 books, there are only 3 that are non-Israeli. The other 17 books are all written by Israelis, all of them. So you can't, you read this, you'll be blown away by what they talk about Israel and the stuff that they actually reveal in their books. And then you can't be accused that, no, your information is biased and incorrect. These are well-known academics, writers, public circuit speakers, renowned people who have written incredible books. And again, Israeli. Right? So you can't say, oh, your source is Palestinian, that's why you're biased. No, okay, fine. I'm not going to read Israeli. So I personally make it a point of not reading. I mean, not reading. I do read books by Palestinians as well, but I tend to use references by Israelis because I find that it's almost like, oh, you can't dispute them. So that's one. You can go to this and then you can click on that, and then you can go to Amazon, you can go to whatever website and try and get these books. 2, activism. Okay. Remember early part of my discussion, I talked about, oh, you know what, if what I'm saying is false, what if I'm saying is fictitious, or if I'm tweaking facts and twisting numbers, really? Okay. Again, go to this website, and then you will come across this page. And you'll come across these hyperlinks. Remember, the green section is hyperlinked. Click on the hyperlink, it will lead you to the website, which we'll talk about, obviously. Palestinian NGOs doing what they do, highlighting the hardships there. But then, yes, I know there are going to be people who will say, well, yeah, but of course you're saying the Palestinians, of course the Palestinians would say that. Really? Okay. Let's go with global groups, well-known global groups funded by global organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. These are all not necessarily funded by the Palestinians. These are global groups, leading human rights groups, extremely well known, extremely well recognized, cited by independent groups around the world, right? 14 leading human rights groups. But then you guys are like, yeah, but then there are some Palestinians in there as well. Okay, fine, fair enough. Let's go with Jewish groups, purely Jewish groups, 100%. All right. Breaking the Silence, Jisha, if not now, now's the time, peace now. Again, they're all purely Israeli and Jewish groups. So there are about 40 odd groups in total that I've documented. Hyperlinked. And again, if you click on the names, then it'll take you straight to the page, which talks about what I'm trying to say it talks about. So that's read done, activism done, boycott. This is a work in progress, right? So you'll have to excuse me. Okay. We need to try and organize ourselves and lead a targeted grassroots call to boycott all leading global brands that operate openly in the illegal settlements. There are a number of brands that operate in illegal settlements, right? We need to find a way to target these companies. Okay, like, I'll show you examples later. And then we also need to lead a boycott of groups that are Israeli brands. I mean, I'm actually sometimes surprised how there are Muslims among us who basically use Fiverr and Wix.com. I mean, what's wrong with WordPress? Why do you have to use Wix.com? It's 100% Israeli. Fiverr, Ahava, Cosmetics. These are brands that, we should lead a global call to boycott these global brands, not just by Muslims, but non-Muslims too. They should boycott them. And then we have obviously the UAE brands. I'll explain why UAE shortly. All right. And then we have Puma and all that. Okay, now here I can explain everything probably clearer. When I say brands illegal operating in the illegal settlements, Airbnb, Expedia, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, HP, Motorola Solutions, Caterpillar, they operate in the illegal settlements. And this is, again, according to the UN Human Rights Office, verified, right? There's no way we should use them. And again, there are plenty of options apart from these companies. Plenty of options. You don't have to use Airbnb. There are other options. You don't have to Expedia. Use Trip.com. I personally like using Trip.com. It's owned by the Chinese company. Amazing. I like them. I don't use Booking.com at all. HP, Motorola. I mean, I suppose I use MacBook, so I wouldn't use any of that anyway. So yeah, I mean, there are many options elsewhere. So that's brands in the illegal settlements. Then we have Israeli brands like Fiverr, Wix, and Ahava. Then you have global sports brands. Why do you have to use Puma? Go with Adidas, go with Nike, go with anyone else. Why Puma? Puma actually supports the Israeli football team. And despite 2-3 years of continuous lobbying, they have refused to listen to Palestinian calls to pull out. Finally, and this part is a bit complicated, I know, but boycott UAE, Dubai, boycott them. They signed a treaty with Israel 2 years ago. So don't fly Emirates. There are plenty of other airlines you can fly on. Fly Qatar. Qatar is good. Forget Etihad. Don't use Aramex. Right, use FedEx. Use UPS. Don't use Aramex. Because these are brands that have sold, these are companies, these are countries that have actually sold, stabbed you in the back. UAE. So I'm actually definitely calling for the boycott of these countries. And it's the logical move. Because what? If you support Israel, if you support UAE, what's next? You're encouraging countries like Indonesia and Malaysia and other countries to do the same thing. Right? If a powerful country like UAE is going to sell its soul to the devil, you know, what about weaker countries? What about them? And then one by one, these chips will fall. And then who's going to back us? So that's activism, read, and boycott. And the last is really charity. Obviously, I run the Gaza Fund. I run it. I started it 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago. We have 100% donation policy, we're 100% transparency, we're 100% focused on Gaza. We disclose our financials online. We're trying to get it registered in Hong Kong. Obviously, it's very, very difficult. We've been asked many, many questions by the authorities, but we keep, every time they ask questions, we disclose it online. Everything is available. Our financials are available online. Our donors are available online. I'd like to think that if there is a charity in Hong Kong, I do not think there's a charity in Hong Kong that discloses as much information as much as we have. I don't think there is one. Without, again, minimizing what they do. I'm sure there are plenty of good charities in Hong Kong, but I'd like to think that we disclose a lot. We're very, very transparent, and that's what we do. So we're the first non-Palestinian charity 100% focused on Gaza. We're the first charity to disclose our cost base. And again, I pay for everything out of my own pocket in terms of expenses. So that number is slightly higher than 8,000, is approximately 8,500 US. So everything that is donated goes straight to Gaza, and the expenses incurred is paid by me, as well as a few donors. Established in 2021, 2021, yeah, that's right. We have raised, actually, we have crossed 1 million already in 18 months. We focus on water filters, food aid packs, educational sponsorship. Again, go to thegazafund.com. It'll be self-explanatory. Why do you need to help Gaza? Again, this is also quite interesting. Gaza is 41 kilometers long. Kowloon is 47 kilometers in size. So the entire Gaza fits into Kowloon. So imagine living in Kowloon and not being able to leave Kowloon. Just imagine that. Imagine not being able to go to, you know, Sha Tin, imagine not going over to new territories, imagine not going into central, just living within Kowloon. 80% of the population in Kowloon, imagine living on aid. Can you imagine that? Imagine living in a place where 4% of the population, 4% of the water is drinkable. Right? And again, imagine every piece of critical infrastructure is bombed. Power plants, water treatment plants, bridges, electricity networks, sewage lines, health facilities. Imagine. Can you imagine that? Living in Kowloon and going through that? But that's exactly what living in Gaza is like. So yeah, for more information about the Gaza Fund, again, visit thegazafund.com. And the only way we actually can win this, change the narrative, is if we understand that we have nothing to lose, and which is why we have to propel ourselves forward. And only then can we change the narrative. I'm just going to very quickly go to a site. Could you please confirm, Anissa, if you can see this website right now? Can you see the website right now? Yes? I can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hi, Anissa, can you see the website right now?
I'm pretty sure it's still the PowerPoint.
It's the PowerPoint, okay. You are screen sharing. How do I,
You can
new share,
unshare,
okay, yep.
yeah.
Google Chrome, desktop, I will try this one. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you seeing this now?
Yes.
Okay, all right. This is the website of thing. Now, what is very important, I'm going to go to this page. I love this page because I've actually gone to great lengths to put together a list of 44 active charities focused on Palestine. Starting with obviously Ummah Welfare Trust. Actually, it's 45 including us, but I'm not including us in this list. There are 44. Ummah Welfare Trust, which is my favorite charity, 100% donation policy, One Nation 100%, Islamic Aid 1%, Muslim Global Relief, One Ummah, Abdullah Aid, Donate to Gaza, right, 100%. And then there are other charities which has 98%, Muslim Hands is 90%, Muslim Charities about 88%, Islamic Relief, again. Whenever you donate to ANIRA, for example, 6% goes into admin. International Red Cross or Red Crescent, 6.5. Again, if you click on the link itself, it'll take you straight to the page, which proves that this is what happens. Disaster Emergent, Children of Peace, Action Aid, all the Save the Children is 14%. Right? Penny Appeal is 17.8%. Middle East Children Alliance, Médecins Sans Frontières is 19%. Oxfam is 30%, a whopping 30% when you donate goes into admin. The others I have not been able to verify, so I've just said, you know what, go to the website itself. So again, I think that's pretty useful to see what happens. What was the other thing that, oh yeah, here, this one here. There are, how many? I mentioned, remember earlier I showed 16 human rights groups and then 10 Israeli groups, 12 Palestinian groups, right? So there are 38 groups. So here's why, I mean, I consider this the mother of all statements on Israel. I'm saying this is what I say to everyone to shut down the entire argument that who's right, who's wrong. This is complicated, this is complex. I'm saying, you know what, sure. Palestinians, you know what? They're lying. Israelis, they're lying. The Jews are lying. Everyone is lying. The Gazans, they're lying. I'm saying, why don't you just simply go to the human rights NGO groups, right? They're neutral. Click on their links. Click on all these links. You know, click on all these links. You click on this link, you go straight. I hope it goes there. Click on their links and go find out for yourself. If we are lying, why are they so critical of Israel and not so much of the Palestinian refugees? Why is that? And they're neutral. They're basically, they've got nothing to gain or lose. So I consider this the mother of all arguments. It just shuts down everything. You know, you don't need Mehdi Hassan basically. I mean, again, I admire him for what he says and the way he presents points, but I consider that you know what, open and shut case right there. So again, this is a useful point that I think we Muslims need to use. I have already gone through the myths in my presentation, 10 questions worth asking. Facts about Israel, blah, blah, blah. What else can I talk about? I mentioned about our expenses. There you go. Here you can see. Yeah, we have delivered 134,000 US worth of aid to Gaza over the years, over the last 2 years, 8,005 in expenses, which I'm paying out of my own pocket. We practice transparency. So yes, that's all I have to say. If anyone has any questions, fire away, please. I'd love to hear them. Anyone?
If you're done with your presentation, any participants can use the chat box or even open your mic to ask questions.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, open your mic or chat would be good. Oh, I see there are 3. Let's see what's happening there.
It seems to be before the session.
Yeah, there's nothing relevant. Are there any questions? Come on, fire away. I'd love to answer some questions. Don't be shy. It's actually very important that you ask questions, because others can learn as well, and I can learn as well, because I love talking points. I love talking points, and again, if you go to my website, a lot of the material that I have developed is based on Q&A sessions that I've had with Israelis, Jews, as well as Palestinians. They say, you know what? Yeah, this is what we feel. And I'm like, really? So I go back and I think, oh, how do I tackle this? And I put it together. And my intention is to keep it in a user-friendly format so that we can all use it. And again, always rely on Israeli sources so that I can't be accused of bias. So please go away, fire away.
Maybe we'll give it a minute or 2. If not, I might, maybe it'll be all for today.
Okay, all right. So okay, in any case, if this is all, yes. If either of you feel passionate about, obviously, this subject and would like to figure out what to do and what we can do, I'd like to just say that, yes, you can, there's a lot you can do. Send me an email at any time. Go to my website and shoot an email. There are a lot of things we can do. So if you're not comfortable asking questions now, later, by all means. But thank you very much for coming, everyone. Jazakallah khair.
Yes, Jazakallah for today's session, brother. If no one has any questions, then I will end the session here today. The next session will be Jesus in Islam, to be presented by Brother Omaru. So stay tuned and see you all next week. Jazakallah, Brother Siddiq.
All right. Thank you, Anisha. Thank you, everyone, for being part of this. I appreciate that. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Stay well.
Walaikum salam.